Short-term to your history, how long have you been with Microsoft?
With Microsoft?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't worked for Microsoft for 6.5 years, but I worked for Microsoft for 12.
And you've been responsible for 2007, 2010,
I go all the way back to 2001.
Oh.
I'm not the mother or father of SharePoint, but I was in the delivery room when the baby was born.
Yeah.
It was my job to clean it up after.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's the guy who have to blame for the...
No, I don't have to be blamed.
No.
Unless it's dirty, then it's my fault.
When I saw your presentation right now, I remembered when SharePoint in 2001 came into the market. Before we had all different applications to do, and SharePoint promised us to get one single point to integrate everything.
Yes.
And then SharePoint grew up like the Borg and assimilated everything, search,
yes,
BI, and whatever.
Yes, that's right.
But when we now look at SharePoint,
Yes.
I think it starts separating everything.
Only
Again,
at first glance.
Yeah, but if you look at Delve or at groups, so
Yeah.
there's particular several tools which are very handy, but I think they're not really connected to the whole platform. How do you think about it?
First of all, it depends on how you define SharePoint. If you're talking about a group of technology, then that's not a correct assessment. If you're talking about a brand, then you're absolutely right. It's my opinion that SharePoint is being, I'm not sure if the expression translates well, carved up for parts. Like when a car gets stolen and they don't necessarily keep the car intact, they'll separate the parts together and they'll go in separate places. Now that's harsh, and I don't really mean it that way. What I do mean, however, is that the individual pieces of SharePoint are being meant to stand alone, if that's what you want. See, when we first created SharePoint, the idea was it would have document management, maybe not the best document management in the world, but some document management. And it would have search, maybe not the best search in the world, but it had search. And it would have collaborative sites on demand, maybe not the 100% best, but it would have them. In fact, it had several different things, and it did them all on one server you ran in your data center, which means you didn't, if you had 6 different workloads, you didn't have 6 different servers that all required their own data storage, and all required their own load balancing, and all required their own security, and all required everything else. So the magic of SharePoint was like it was a Swiss Army knife, one box, many functions. In the cloud, which is where Delve is happening and OneDrive for Business is happening and everything else, the fact that it's all running in one server is completely irrelevant because you just have a URL. You don't care. Which means there's pressure on Microsoft to have SharePoint document libraries not be good enough, but actually be good. Which means OneDrive for Business has to compete with Dropbox, and it has to compete with Box, and it has to compete with Google Drive, and so on. And it's being given its own identity because if you're thinking, well, I just need a place to put my docs. SharePoint, that's a big thing, and it involves all kinds of moving parts. I have no idea what I'm going to do. Well, that's fine. Use this piece of SharePoint. We're calling it OneDrive for Business, and I use that. That's okay, and people can understand that. I think search, well, actually, Delve is largely search-based, which means you might see certain services that are being driven by search that show up as what look like standalone services. But what's behind Delve? Totally SharePoint. What's behind OneDrive for Business? SharePoint. Power BI. Well, it's SharePoint with other stuff. But the point is, the SharePoint technology base always was separate groups for separate things. There was a dedicated search team. There was a dedicated BI team. There was a dedicated collaboration team, and so on. But they were all brought together under one delivery vehicle, and that delivery vehicle was SharePoint sites. Well, it just so happens the extensibility model from SharePoint sites is changing. So there's the app model where you're supposed to surface your app inside of a SharePoint site without it actually being in that SharePoint site. SharePoint's healthy, SharePoint's alive and well. It's just you may not be calling it SharePoint that often anymore. In fact, you may be seeing more than one way to get at all those services. In fact, you already have.
Yeah. So when I saw your demonstration right
Yeah.
now, could workflow be the new thing that embrace everything if it's attached to process? But because when you did
Well, it always
demo,
was.
yeah, but seems to be of a future development here. You
Yeah.
have been mobile. You get information about on your YAML account, on your link information. You have a web-based form, or you get it by email. So could workflow and attaching to processes be one part or the new way how we connect all these different parts again?
The answer is yes, but there's nothing new about it. You see, again, it all depends on your point of view. For the longest time, people were thinking about integration or composite applications or whatever you wanted to call them as I put a whole bunch of things on a page. Those could be web parts, those could be app parts, they could be apps, I don't really care. The point is, they were thinking about it from either a transaction or a business intelligence dashboard style point of view, but in truth, connecting those things together with a process has always been there. We've certainly believed that, and customers have used us for that. But yeah, using processes to link those things together is a really big deal. In fact, if you don't have processes automating some of that work, all you've done is put things in one place, but you still need people to spend part of their day proactively checking a site to see if there's work to do. We think there's a better way. In fact, even Microsoft thinks there's a better way. Satya Nadella these days, although he said something embarrassing a few days ago, the day before that, he said something quite insightful, which was, what Microsoft is focused on doing is giving you back 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour a day in order to focus on the things you really care about. When I talked about everyday processes before, same kind of thing. The point is, of course, processes can be used to link everything together. Nintex customers have been doing that for some time. We're hardly alone in that regard, but our people are particularly good at that, especially because we can be used by professionals and also by mere mortals to do citizen integration.
Yeah, but when in 2007 you had tools like SharePoint Designer, which was a tool where you can put up some of your workflows, but it was not for the business user. But now these surfaces will be very easy to use. It will be accessible for everyone. It was, and so I think this is a focus on usability.
Yes.
And this makes it available for everyone.
I obviously agree with you, yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Actually,
last question?
The scary thing, go ahead, ask me the last question. No, it's all right. This one I'll volunteer in a minute, go ahead.
Last question about, what are your expectations for next year, for 2015?
For 2015?
15.
I don't think it's going to be radically different. I think it's going to be incrementally improved. I think they're going to deal with a lot of the behind-the-scenes issues that they've dealt with to make it a whole lot more stable, scalable, to make the pieces work together better. But I think they're committed to gradual improvements as opposed to dramatic improvements. And I think the next version of SharePoint will look very much like this version, except it'll work much more nicely. I could be wrong about that, but I don't have expectation. I will say this, here are some of the trends. All the good stuff is going to be in the cloud first. It's already happening, and that's not going to change. And as to why, well, that's how SharePoint can expand. Most everyone who could buy SharePoint has bought SharePoint. How can it expand? Extra capacity for large organizations or first-time use of SharePoint by smaller organizations that would have never set it up locally inside their own data centers if they, in fact, had a data center. They need that in order to make that happen. Also, the other thing is, you may not know this, but SharePoint is a complicated product.
Yeah.
Definitely. One way they get away with removing the complexity of deploying SharePoint is to just say, go pay for it in the cloud. Now, I'm not saying there aren't plenty of other reasons that make the cloud not as attractive. I'm just giving you Microsoft's motivation, because with every version of SharePoint, it gets more and more complex. And one way to solve it is to let them run it. And the third thing, this actually was the thing I was going to interrupt you with a moment ago. If you run SharePoint the way the SharePoint team expects you to run it, if you use the product they built, that's probably a fairer way to put it. If you use what they built, it works. It actually works really well. The thing is, a lot of people want to do things with SharePoint that the SharePoint team never, ever, ever thought of. Who likes to do what I will call euphemistically aggressive branding? You don't have to raise your hand. It's okay on this. But if you don't, you know people who do. And there's a line somewhere between branding and hacking. And I don't know exactly where that line is, but there's a line. And one of the reasons why the attention is in the cloud is because it's harder to hack. In fact, a lot of branders are not happy with the limitations they have out in the cloud. And Microsoft needs to adapt to that. And I don't know if they'll do this in the next version of SharePoint, but I'm hoping they do this in the next version of SharePoint, is provide a cleaner, clearer way of how to customize SharePoint without hurting it. Because the answer in Office 365 is don't break our stuff.
Yeah.
Leave us the heck alone and just use the feature set we gave you out of the box. That makes some people not so happy.
So as the dad of SharePoint, the father
No.
of SharePoint, one of the father,
Midwife. Midwife of SharePoint. I was the nurse in the delivery room.
Are you satisfied with your child?
Oh, I think the child grew up and became a really interesting, multi-dimensional person. I think that child didn't grow up to be a doctor. The child grew up to be, Indiana Jones. He's an archaeologist. He's a crime stopper. He's all over the map.
Everything.
Yeah, he can't decide what he wants to be, but he's pretty good at a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
So versatile. Oh, I know. Okay, to use, I don't normally like to use military terms, but this will work in this case. He's not a specialist. He's a generalist in a lot of different things. I could parachute him in to an uncertain situation and use it for a whole bunch of stuff at once.
Okay.
So very, very, very versatile. So yeah, I'm proud of him. But yeah, he's weird.
Okay.
I can't explain to people what he does for a living.
Okay. Great final word. Thank you, Mark.
My pleasure.
For being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.